Hi, I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the agency responsible for the Sprinter is in hot water again. An audit reveals some major deficiencies at the North County Transit District. One expert is calling that report frightening.
And I'm Peggy Pico. San Diego's mayor and city council approve a nearly $3 billion city budget. Who gets more money and whose funding might be cut? Then our continuing coverage of the San Onofre shutdown. Experts weigh in on nuclear fuel that's too hot to touch. What to do with the radioactive waste left behind.
Plus, part 2 of our investigation on San Diego taxi permits and how they're being sold for a lot of cash on a shadow market. Today, we'll take a closer look at regulations in the taxi business.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown has the night off. San Diego Gas and Electric is reviving plans to build a large gas-fired power plant after news that the San Onofre nuclear plant is closing. The utility plans to ask state regulators next week to approve a 300-megawatt plant near the Mexican border. The California Public Utilities Commission actually rejected the PO Pico Energy project back in March, but SDG&E says that decision didn't take into account San Onofre's permanent closing. The project has long been opposed by environmental groups. San Diego's largest utility and state power grid managers say there should be enough electricity to keep the power on this summer, but how the summer develops will have a huge influence on the region's power supply. Power grid manager Eric Schmidt says a normal summer will be a cinch.
Our reserve margins are adequate, so we have enough supply to meet the anticipated demand given what we understand about weather forecasts and so on.
Schmidt says even the loss of the San Onofre nuclear reactors or extra pressure from an improving economy don't cast a shadow long enough to worry grid operators. But there are threats out there. Schmidt says the optimism would evaporate if there's an extended heat wave, if there are wildfires near transmission lines, or if a major power plant goes down.
Extreme conditions will make things very tight, and our operators will, as usual, stay in front of that and monitor things and keep a close watch.
Reserve power margins would fall to just over 4% in extreme summer conditions. SDG&E's Mike Nigley says that would prompt local officials to call for conservation.
Demand response is really important to the region if we do call on you. Our customers have always been in a position where they have responded to our needs in this area, and we very much appreciate the partnership with our customers in conservation and demand response.
Now, SDG&E has incentives for residential and business customers to reduce electricity when the demand squeezes the power supply. The closure of the San Onofre nuclear power plant will also have an effect on air quality. San Diego County Supervisor Ron Roberts says another power source will likely be less clean at first.
And it's not clear what the composition is going to be and where that power is exactly going to come from to make up from the deficit. That's why it makes it hard to analyze this. But the short term is we're going to have some emissions somewhere. The long term, to have a short-term nuclear risk versus the long-term global warming issues, this is an easy thing to figure out. Of course you're going to close that if you can't do it safely.
Now, in our continuing coverage on the permanent shutdown of the San Onofre nuclear generating station, we take a look at what could happen to the radioactive fuel that is left behind. Peggy Pico has more.
When a nuclear power plant shuts down for good, as in the case of San Onofre, it leaves behind the disturbing dilemma of what to do with the radioactive spent fuel left behind. Here with some insight into that issue are my guests, William and Rosemary Alley, co-authors of Too Hot to Touch, The Problem of High-Level Nuclear Waste. Thank you both for joining me.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Now, Bill, remind us again of why spent nuclear fuel is kept on site, and how long does it have to stay there usually?
Okay. Well, it's when spent nuclear fuel is removed from a nuclear power plant, it's extraordinarily hot and it's extraordinarily radioactive. So it's put into pools for at least 5 years while some of the radioactivity and the heat die down.
The cooling pools.
The cooling pools. That's what they're called, cooling pools. And then eventually they're to be moved to dry cask, and then the idea originally was that they would then be moved to a geologic repository.
Okay, so that sounds pretty logical, Rosemarie. How come you can't just store the fuel at the plant? What's the problem with that?
Well, certainly the time frame. Spent nuclear fuel is radioactive for around 1 million years. So this is not a long-term solution to store it at the plant. And again, pretty much all the nuclear power plants in the U.S. are near major cities or waterways. Another problem with the pools, however, is that many of the pools in the U.S. now hold 4 to 5 times the amount of waste they were designed to handle. Because of the backlog, because there is no repository, to start moving this waste, once it gets to a cool enough stage that it could be moved to a repository. So we're seeing a huge backlog in the pools.
Let's talk about that, the storing at the other plants. There's other U.S. Nuclear plants that have been shut down, and they store their fuel there, and they're also that's the backlog you're talking about?
Well, all nuclear power plants store the spent fuel in the pools for the first 5 years. But what I'm saying is many of these pools hold 4 to 5 times the amount of waste they were designed to handle because of this backlog. Now, San Onofre has just joined, it's now the 11th decommissioned or shut down nuclear power plant that will have stranded fuel, where the power plant is gone.
But
and
the fuel
the
has
fuel
to remain
will
behind
sit there, yes.
For
Yes.
at least the 5 years. And Bill, since this reactor has been offline in San Onofre since January, so 16 months, hasn't the fuel already started to cool off? Can we count that sort of in that time that we're supposed to?
That counts, but you're only a year and so into the million-year time frame that it's unsafe. And so it hasn't generated any new radioactivity because they haven't been operating the plant. But
is it dangerous to move the fuel? I mean, on the one hand, you don't want it sitting there on faults and on our coastline. On the other hand, what about the process of moving it in and of itself? Is that dangerous?
There is a danger to it, which is one of the reasons there's an argument about whether you move the waste to an interim storage site somewhere and then move it a second time to a repository, or you just move it once.
Rosemarie, what are our options for moving it? I know that Yucca Mountain at one point was thought to be a good idea, a place to move it. Do we have any options to move this fuel out of San Onofre?
Well, at this time, the nuclear waste program is in complete shambles in the U.S. The administration, Congress, the courts are all at loggerheads. And so right now the fallback position is the waste is staying in pools. Some of it is being moved to dry casks that have a 50-year design life. The dry casks are being promoted as a solution for 100 years, maybe 300 years, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is now saying. But we're talking about...
I want to delve into that. I don't mean to interrupt. But explain what a dry cask is and how that's supposed to contain that fuel.
Yeah, well, they kind of look like grain silos, okay? It's a concrete, it's a very robust concrete container with a steel liner that the spent fuel assemblies are put in. It's cooled through natural air circulation, so it's not dependent upon electricity, which is one of the vulnerabilities of the pools. But again, it's not a long-term solution. Dry casks have an important role as part of a responsible nuclear waste program. But the open-ended time frame raises serious concerns.
What do you do next? Just
Yeah.
one step at a time. Bill, what are other countries doing with their radioactive nuclear waste? Can we take any hints from anybody else, or is everybody in the same boat?
Well, it varies. No country in the world has an operating geologic repository. Very few countries have their waste scattered amongst as many sites as we do. 2 countries, Sweden and Finland, are fairly far along in terms of developing a repository. So they're actually building one, I believe, in Finland at this point in time. France is also making some progress. But a lot of countries are in the same boat as the U.S., pretty much back to square one, pretty much no indefinite storage at their existing sites.
In a word or two, a solution? Do we have a solution to this?
There's no easy solution. I think the abandonment of Yucca Mountain for purely political reasons was a major mistake. At the same time, putting all our eggs in one basket at Yucca Mountain and not developing alternative plans was another mistake. And there's a public education aspect to it, too.
Do you have a solution idea?
We just need to get this stuff underground and find the safest, most responsible site we can find, and then just recognize that there's no guarantee when you're looking into a million years. But we have to get it underground.
Have to get a next step. All right,
Yeah.
William and Rosemary Alley, thank you so much for joining us. I want to let folks know that they can get more information and comment on decommissioning the power plant at San Onofre by going to kpbs.org/San Onofre.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
An audit of the North County Transit District found 19 deficiencies in the department responsible for contracts and oversight. One LA Transit Board member called the report frightening. Joining us now is iNewsSource reporter Brad Racino with the details. So, Brad, tell us about the audit. When did it come out?
Sure. Interestingly enough, it was published last September, but it wasn't presented publicly until last month at NCTD's May board meeting. Two board members I spoke with said last month was the first time they'd seen this report.
And what did that report have to say?
A lot. The audit was of the district's Contracts and Procurement Department, which awards district money and oversees all its contractors. Now, that's significant because a few years back, the agency outsourced virtually everything and now has about 20% of its former staff, so it leaves the rest up to its contractors. The audit found that this department was full of inefficiencies and failings. Key employees aren't speaking to each other. The billing system is prone to error. There's a lack of federal and state compliance monitoring. Too many things to name here.
So the report issued 8 months ago. Have they fixed things since then?
Doesn't appear so. A lot of the findings in the report strongly relate to a lot of the issues we've uncovered at the district over just the last few months. The security breach story, the investigation into oversight and accountability, these were all published relatively recently, while this report was issued 8 months ago.
iNewsSource reporter Brad Racino. Thanks, Brad. For more on the audit and to read about the 19 deficiencies found, go to kpbs.org/transit. Both the mayor and city council approved the nearly $3 billion city budget late Monday night. Peggy Pico explains which programs are going to be expanding and shrinking under that new spending plan.
San Diego City budget for the 2013-2014 fiscal year passed with a 7-2 vote. Council members Kevin Faulkner and Scott Sherman opposed it. Joining me with details on where the $2.75 billion will be spent is San Diego City Council President Todd Gloria. Todd, welcome back.
Thank you.
So this budget is for the general fund for the coming fiscal year starting in July. Highlight some of the services that will either stay or expand.
Well, the council improved on the mayor's proposal by doing sort of 3 key things. One is that we expanded library hours at every branch library in every neighborhood in the city, so an additional 4 hours at every one of those locations. We came up with a police retention program. I think most of your viewers know that we were having difficulty retaining our experienced officers. They're leaving for other jurisdiction. We made a down payment on trying to keep those folks here, and so that we save the costs that we experienced due to training. And then lastly, you know, in response to, I think, a great public outcry about the condition of our sidewalks, we made $1 million investment on trying to work toward repairing all of them. All of those things, in addition to more money for homeless services and other issues that I think are key to the mayor and council.
Particularly the homeless service, that is a year-round homeless shelter. This is the first time.
Right. This is taking the approach that we've had previously, where the winter tent would just be up in the wintertime, and the mayor's proposal is to do it year-round. We don't believe he has enough money to actually do it year-round, but it'll be up a significantly longer amount of time. That's going to really allow people who are homeless more pathways out of homelessness to break that cycle and hopefully benefit the taxpayers because they're no longer relying on emergency services for care.
Linking them into other services that have already
right.
Going on. Okay. Back in May, the mayor's revised budget proposal sought to cut $500 to $900 million from City Attorney Jan Goldsmith's budget. That did not happen in this budget that the council approved. Tell us about that.
That's right. It's actually $500,000. The mayor slated that reduction, and the council voted yesterday on a 5-4 vote not to do that. And I think that that's really key. We understand that cut would result in probably the laying off of roughly 13 city prosecutors, the people who prosecute misdemeanor crimes, things like prostitution, gang houses, crack houses, that kind of stuff. We can't have more of those in our community, and I hope that the mayor would follow along in terms of the council's wishes to restore those funding.
And would that preserve that neighborhood prosecution unit? Like you say, some of these minor offenses that they actually get community service and sort of keeps the courts free?
It's our understanding that the reduction is up to the city attorney to apply, but the $500,000, much of his work is not discretionary. It's prescribed by the charter. This is one area that is discretionary, and he's indicated that's where the cuts would come. But yeah, these are the folks that from the city's legal team that work on neighborhood nuisances. They've helped me when I was a neighborhood activist in City Heights to work on drug houses and prostitution issues. These are the kinds of things that we would see more of if this cut is not implemented, and that's why the council voted not to implement it.
City Council member Kevin Faulkner was one of the two who opposed the budget. He said that this budget does not reflect the priorities of San Diegans, paving street, restoring neighborhood services, and eliminating waste, so I cannot support it. What areas of waste is he referring to?
Well, I think Kevin is responding to the sort of lack of clarity when it comes to managed competition. Obviously, the voters a number of years ago asked the city to bid out its functions to try and reduce costs. We've done that successfully with 5 functions. The mayor has been somewhat ambivalent on that issue. He has indicated to the council that he will continue to do it. We haven't really seen signs that he will. I think that's what Kevin's point is.
The mayor quickly approved this budget, although he still has line veto power or veto power. It goes into effect July 1st. He says, no tricks, no gimmicks, no hidden costs. This is a solid foundation that will keep the city's financial recovery, on track. How does the new 5-year labor union deal with the city impact the city's finances and help keep this on track?
It's enormously positive, and the reason why every citizen should be grateful that that deal was done. What it does is it creates certainty on our labor costs for the next 5 years, and actually instantly should reduce our pension bill by roughly $20 million, going to the fiscal restraint.
$20 million a year.
For the next foreseeable year, yeah. And what that does is we were actually going to that fiscal restraint the mayor is referring to. We're taking roughly half of those proceeds and putting them towards neighborhood services, and the other half we're putting in reserves. I think that's a really fiscally disciplined way to approach this, and proof that we're not going back to the old ways.
And which programs will shrink?
They're only, in terms of this budget, the only thing that's slated for reduction is the city attorney's office, and that's why that particular cut is kind of stands out and why it shouldn't be allowed to stand.
All right. Well, there's a whole lot more on our website about this. Is San Diego City Council President Todd Gloria. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Peggy.
Governor Jerry Brown and lawmakers have reached a deal on the state budget. Both sides agreed to use more conservative revenue projections for income tax revenues, but more optimistic estimates for property tax revenues. Democrats are banking on those extra funds to pay for a wide range of programs from courts to community colleges. The budget still needs approval of the full legislature and the governor's signature before it can take effect next month. Retired military leaders visited a Linda Vista preschool today to call on California to invest in early childhood education. A new report from a group called Mission Readiness says 75% of 17 to 24-year-olds can't qualify for military service because of poor health and poor education. The report says high-quality preschool could change that by preparing students for school success. It estimates opening more preschool seats could mean 250,000 more high school grads in California over the next 10 years.
What that translates to is more high school graduates, better prepared, ready to volunteer if they so choose to join the military, but also ready to go into the private sector to compete on a global scale.
California has lost about 100,000 preschool seats to state funding cuts over the last several years. A California consumer group is suing the nation's largest health insurer for discrimination against HIV/AIDS patients. The class action suit alleges United Healthcare is breaking the law by requiring patients to get their medications by mail order. Joining us is KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. Kenny, what's wrong with requiring HIV patients to get those prescription drugs by mail?
Well, Consumer Watchdog, the group that's filing the lawsuit against United Healthcare, says there's a couple problems with it. Number one, they say HIV/AIDS patients depend on their local pharmacists to monitor their drug interactions and any kind of adverse side effects they might have. Number two, according to California law, it's illegal to single out a special group for special treatment based on their health condition. And Consumer Watchdog says that's exactly what this new policy from United Healthcare does.
Well, what does United Healthcare say about their new policy?
Well, they wouldn't speak about it specifically, at least about the lawsuit, but they did say that patients under their new policy will have 24-hour access to specially trained pharmacists. They'll have patient care advocates available by phone. So they say they'll still have an array of services.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS health reporter. Thanks very much for that, Kenny. Taxi permits are being sold in San Diego for huge sums of money on what Mayor Bob Filner calls a black market. Insiders say this market is creating high cab fares and poor working conditions for drivers. They blame lax oversight by the Metropolitan Transit System. In the second part of a two-part story, KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma says Filner wants to transfer regulation of San Diego's taxi industry from MTS to City Hall.
San Diego's highly coveted taxi permits are public property, but they are sold on an underground market tax-free for as much as $160,000 in cash.
It's a very corrupt system, so they don't take check, they don't take money order. They just require cash, large bill, and then you have to drop 7-Eleven, some liquor store, some garage.
Fred spoke to KPBS on the condition of anonymity for fear he will be retaliated against by cab companies and other drivers. He says he has purchased and sold several permits on the private market over the last decade. When a permit changes hands, it's called a transfer. The person receiving the permit just has to pass an eligibility check and pay MTS a $3,000 fee. But behind the scenes, Fred says huge sums of money are changing hands between the person turning over the permit to MTS and the person receiving it. The transfers have left San Diego Mayor Bob Filner perplexed.
Why should you be able to transfer to anybody else at highly inflated prices? If you're not going to use it, give it back to the city.
Public documents show MTS is aware of the shadow market. In fact, a 2010 study commissioned by the agency states that, quote, profit-taking has occurred on a grand scale in San Diego's taxi market. The report says MTS has the authority to stop the practice and require that permits be surrendered to the agency and reissued through a process with more governmental control. KPBS attempted to ask MTS why it allows the transfers, but the agency refused to grant a recorded interview. In an email, spokesman Rob Shupp said, quote, our board has not considered the specific issue of permit transfers and therefore has no position on the subject. In the 2010 study, however, the MTS consultant wrote that the sale of these permits encourages taxi owners to invest in their businesses and cars. The report also credits such transactions with creating an opening for newcomers into the taxi market. It concluded, quote, there is no compelling public interest that would be served by disallowing permit transfers. Cab driver lawyer Bob Glazer says the opposite is true. Permit transfers and the parallel sales on the hidden market are hurting consumers and cab drivers.
If a driver has to pay $150,000 just to get into business, well, they're going to keep their rates as high as they possibly can.
San Diego has some of the highest cab fares in the country. Expensive permits also mean drivers who can't afford to buy one must lease instead at costly rates, sometimes paying more than half of their earnings to cover those rates. The root problem, according to insiders, is a shortage of permits. In the city of San Diego, 993 permits are held by 418 individuals and cab company owners, according to MTS. Meanwhile, there are 1,850 licensed cab drivers. Since 1989, only 125 new permits have been issued, according to agency documents. Glazer says it's a system that drives up the price of permits by keeping them scarce.
There'd be no need to sublease if everybody could get a license. There'd be no need to buy or sell licenses on the black market if everybody could get a license.
A San Francisco city agency is trying out a program for buying and selling taxi medallions. The city of New York buys and sells taxi permits. They are also sold there in private auctions. San Diego's USA Cab Company co-owner Alfredo Hueso says he's in favor of local government taking a bigger role in the sale of permits.
We've actually have approached policymakers on that many times, and they've been not interested in that issue.
Meanwhile, MTS may lose its oversight of San Diego's taxi industry. Mayor Filner says the city is exploring taking control of regulation after scores of complaints from drivers and passengers about the way MTS is running the system.
I think it's been lax. That's why we're going to take it over. They've allowed this black market situation to develop without any oversight.
But the city has its own history with taxi regulation. In 1970, then San Diego Mayor Frank Curran and several members of the city council were arrested and accused of taking bribes from a cab company owner. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, a report from Qatar on the struggle to provide water to its booming population. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
It'll be mostly sunny and warmer throughout the county over the next couple of days, of course, once the fog lifts. Highs are expected to be 69 to 70 degrees near the coast, almost 80 inland. In our mountains, look for sunny and clear skies during the day, but chilly weather at night. Hot and dry with triple-digit temperatures expected in the deserts. There is still hope for those looking to go to Comic-Con this year, those people without tickets. Single-day badges that have been returned or canceled are now available for purchase via a drawing. Now, the deadline to enter is 10:59 tomorrow morning. The Pop Culture Convention will be held the week of July 18th at the San Diego Convention Center. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.